another tale from the days of Andy working in psychiatry. This one, not really a particularly good story. Got to say, doesn't make me look good, doesn't make actually any of it look good. It was a bit of a shit show, to be fair. So a family asked me, would I represent their son at a mental health tribunal? He had been detained on and off for over 10 years in a psychiatric unit. He was a chronic schizophrenic. The last time he had been picked up, he'd been running through the streets naked, and the police had picked him up. Now, he had been at this point detained for quite a long time, and he was up for the routine appeal, where he basically gets to present, if he wishes, to the tribunal, mental health tribunal panel, to appeal against further detention. And if the panel, who are supposedly independent, agree, then he can't be detained any further, and it can potentially release him. However, because this is his third sequential appeal, if he doesn't win the appeal, he can now be detained. I think it was that back then, it would have been for 2 years before any further appeals come up again. So essentially, this is him now presenting to a panel that he doesn't have to be detained. Otherwise, they've got him for 2 years, and there's nothing he can do about that. He's not committed any crimes. He's not got any criminal history whatsoever. And without trial, and under the guise of total confidentiality, no one is allowed to even know this takes place. Remember, confidentiality is there to protect the patient's interests. Yeah, and we've got all these people who are actually detained against their will, often, well, nearly always actually, when they're detained against their will. And no one's allowed to know about it. Obviously, the families know, but it's not allowed to be reported in the press, and no one can release details of who the person is and so forth. There's a lot of that goes on. People don't realise. So the family said, would I represent this fella? I said, absolutely. So I went to meet him a day or two before, and he seemed pretty confused. He seemed pretty schizophrenic, to be fair. Seemed like a very pleasant guy, and I would imagine he would be a great patient to have if you worked in a unit. He was a cheerful fellow. He wasn't dangerous. He was probably potentially fun to be around. Completely mad. On the day of the hearing, I turned up early, as I always do for everything. And I'm aware that as people are coming into the room that has been delegated for use of this appeal, there's lots of various people from out the hospital who make up the panel. First thing I'm thinking was, this is supposed to be independent. This lot all know each other. And they did. They're coming from all different departments, and clearly they know each other from the world of work. And it takes on the atmosphere of a bit of a jolly, people being quite cheery and jolly and all the rest of it. Now, the patient's with me. And of course, he's really in a fight for his freedom. And this lot are taking it as an opportunity, basically, to get out of the office and have a bit of a jolly. Now, this is where it all goes a bit bad, because I thought, when they finally started the meeting, I thought, it's a bit unfair for this guy to have to prove that he's sane. Because essentially, what he's got to do is present himself to the panel, with my assistance, that he is sane enough to be released. So I said, before we begin, can somebody please here give me a demonstration of sanity? It would be useful for my client to have a model to follow. People looked at each other, looked at me like I was insane. I said, it's not unreasonable if my client has to demonstrate he is sane, that everybody here also does the same. I'd like to know what sanity looks like. It was explained to me that that's not really how things work. Okay, that's not going to go anywhere. Then I say, okay, how long have you had my patient for? Or had my client for? They said, we've had him on and off for about 10 years. I said, during those 10 years, has he shown any sign of improvement whatsoever? And they explained that no, because of his diagnosis, which was simple schizophrenia, which sounds like a silly diagnosis. Simple schizophrenia is actually the one with the worst outcome. Generally, people deteriorate over time. This was explained at length. And I said, okay, so he's not showing signs of improvement. They said, no, he's shown the predictable course of deterioration over that time. So I said, and I thought I was being clever, so are you able to demonstrate competency to treat? Because if you've had him for 10 years and he's shown no signs of improvement, that suggests to me that you cannot treat him. If you keep him for another 2 years, what are you going to do differently? You see, I don't think my client needs to demonstrate his sanity. If you're the guy taking away his liberty, you need to be able to demonstrate your ability to give him effective treatment. Otherwise, what are you going to do apart from lock him away from the community, from his family, and from people who could potentially help him? I thought that was pretty clever. I thought I did it very well. I thought I presented very politely and very nicely. And it was communicated back to me that this kind of reasoning was not welcome in this meeting, and that is not the purpose of this meeting. They then asked me to leave.